Okay, hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Vietnam emerging as a sportswear manufacturer. And I'd like to start off by asking, when did Nike first produce in China? And the answer is 1978. Then the next question is when did Nike start producing in Vietnam? And the answer is 1995. And when did Vietnam enter into the World Trade Organization? It was 2007. Fast forward to 2024, and Vietnam has a reputation around the world as being one of the best countries for manufacturing apparel. But I would like to suggest that Vietnam already emerged. And if the time to get into Vietnam was back in the 1990s and early 2000s, a lot of the big name brands for the last 10 years have been starting to look outside and find alternatives. So I think everybody knows that China is number one in terms of the largest manufacturer of clothing, then Bangladesh, and then Vietnam is number three, and then Turkey, India, Italy, Indonesia. So Vietnam is definitely the place to be, but it already emerged. So why is Vietnam so popular? Is it the population? I would say no, because Vietnam only has 100 million people, and you can see all the countries above that have significantly more populations, more people. Is it the labor cost? I would say no, because a lot of the countries that have significantly more population have the same or lower labor cost. So what is it about Vietnam? And I've been living there for 14 years, and I worked for a sportswear manufacturer as their marketing manager. And based on my experience, it's their mindset. Vietnam is special because of their mindset, and it's based on history. So here you see a picture of the Han Dynasty in 60 BC, and the Chinese invaded and occupied the north of Vietnam 3 separate times in a 1,000-year period. Then, in 1855, the French colonized Vietnam and were there for 100 years. And then from 1955 to 1975, the Chinese and the Russians supported the North to fight against the South, and the Americans, Australians, and South Koreans were supporting the South of Vietnam. But in all 3 cases, Vietnam fought to keep their independence. And at the same time, they got a lot of experience working with foreigners. They learned from the foreigners. They studied how the foreigners think, and they adapted their ways of doing business to maintain good relationships with the foreigners in order to grow. So that's why I say, to me, the reason why Vietnam is so amazing and number 3 in the world with such a small population is based on its history and the way the people think. Another example is, does anybody know what 3 words are at the top of every government document and every business contract? In other words, what are the core values of Vietnam? It's independence, freedom, and happiness. And you think, wow, those are the same core values as the French revolutionaries. Those are the same core values as the American revolutionaries. And what I can tell you, having lived there for 14 years, is that when you're working with the Vietnamese people or dealing with the Vietnamese government, it's comfortable because I, as an American, share similar values as they do. So that's another reason why I think Vietnam is so amazing and why it's number 3 in the world for apparel production. Okay, enough about history. So my name is Chris. I've lived in Vietnam for 14 years. I started working for a sportswear factory doing their marketing. And then in 2017, I opened up my own consulting agency, and I specialize in tours, so taking people to visit factories. And my mission is to introduce Vietnamese factories to the world. And here you can see Sunny, who's a good friend of mine, giving a tour to my clients of his offset sublimation printing factory. So that's what I do. But today, we're talking about producing sportswear in 2024. And the good news, one reason why Vietnam has emerged, is that you can now do everything in Vietnam, starting with the fiber. So you've probably heard yarn forward. The rules of origin are like yarn forward in order to qualify for free trade agreements. Well, you can also start with the fiber. So I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to textiles and apparel, so I want to give you a quick crash course in fibers. And one of the reasons is that one of the common questions I get is people say, hey, yeah, Chris, I want to start a fashion brand and I want to use Lululemon fabric. I'm like, well, do you even know what Lululemon fabric is? No. Can you get that information on the internet? No. Lululemon doesn't make that public information. And even if you were able to find some sources, it probably would be over your head in terms of understanding the fiber, because it all starts with the fiber. So this is really interesting picture. On the far right, you see, these are electron microscopic images of fibers. And you can see how smooth polyester is, then cotton, linen, silk, cashmere, alpaca, fine wool, and coarse wool. And this is why wool is itchy and why they have to add descaling agents to make it smoother. But for sportswear, the main thing is polyester. And there is a lot of polyester manufacturing in Vietnam. And another thing that people don't understand, which I think is just really cool, I just want to share it with you, is that each fiber has a cross-section. And you can see you've got amorphous shapes with hollow cores. You've got like starfish shapes, just round. And then you've got, like asteroid shaped fibers. So if you really want to control the outcome of your fabric and compete with Lululemon, you need to go deep and you need to control the cross sections of the fibers. And then from there, there's many, many other things you can do. You can add chemicals at the fiber production level, and then there's different ways of spinning and then knitting, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So, then this is really cool too. So this is another electron microscopic picture, and you can see that like from here to there is one yarn, and one yarn can have anywhere from 42 or like here you can see 24. So these are filaments. So each one of these is a filament, and you can see all the different options. This is from a supplier in Vietnam, and they've got Dernier, which just go on Wikipedia and research it, because it's not easy to understand, and I don't want to spend the time today. But just know that you have the variables of Dernier, filament, and then ply. And here you can see that one yarn is made up of a lot of filaments. So just kind of cool. And Vietnam, there's factories in Vietnam that can help you manage all of this. Okay, so moving forward, now I just want to introduce you to some factories. For example, there's Century, VN Poly, and Doti Hutex. They all produce the fiber and then they spin it. One notable fact about Century Vietnam is that they have the license to sell Reprieve, which is a traceable recycled polyester that's produced by Unify, which is an American company. So if you need traceable recycled polyester in Vietnam, it's available. And then all three of these companies are Vietnamese. All right, let's see, moving on. Vietnam, how do I say? A lot of specialty fiber manufacturers are also moving into Vietnam. So this is a very special case of Sud Wulla Group, and their factory is called Dalat Worsted Spinning. And you can see this is a famous city called Dalat, which is like a romantic city up in the highlands. If you go to Vietnam, strongly recommend you visit Dalat. And then they have just they're in the process of constructing a wool yarn dyeing factory, and it will be online early next year. So, even specialty yarns like wool exist in Vietnam. I just want to point out that this is Ho Chi Minh City, where I live, and 60% of the factories are within like a 200-mile radius of Ho Chi Minh City. And then if you go north, they're just kind of spread out. It's not like China where you have clusters. You do have industrial parks, but it's just not the same as China. It's more spread out. Okay, moving on. There are associations, so if you need help to do your research and meet people in Vietnam, there's VSource, which is the Cotton Spinning Association. There's Vitas and Vinatex, and they each have like 1,000 members each, and they have offices where you can go, and they will help you, introduce you to their member factories. And here you can see this 9th Vietnam Textile Summit. So if you're interested in coming to Vietnam, I recommend you come June 5th to 6th and attend that summit. Make some good contacts. Okay, so then moving on to knitting. This is a Vietnamese company, and you can see they do all the basic sportswear fabrics. And then I chose this one because there's a trend of Chinese companies setting up factories in Vietnam. So MKC Textile is a Chinese factory that set up like 4 years ago. And then you've got Eclat, and Eclat is the best of the best in the whole world. If you, like Lululemon would go to Eclat, and Eclat will work with them to develop the next Lululemon fabric. Of course, there's many more. There's hundreds of knitting factories, but these are just 3. Just remember, there's Vietnamese ones, then there's foreign ones, like this is Taiwan, this is Chinese, they're also Koreans, and each one has their own specialty, characteristic, and equipment. So you just have to meet all of them and find out which ones can serve you best. Then there's dyeing. In my research, I found this company, J-Hum, and anybody here heard of waterless dyeing? That's very, very cutting edge. And so it's just another example of how Vietnam has emerged. And if you need waterless dyeing, there's more than one. There's another Dutch dyeing factory that does waterless. Then you have Trung Hip Tan, which is 100% Vietnamese owned. They have a very big factory. They do a great job of processing their wastewater to an international standard. And then you have Wu Lien, which is in Vietnam, they're called Ya Luen. And yeah, they're Taiwanese. They have a big factory. They do knitting and dyeing, and they produce very nice quality sportswear fabric. And then when it comes to printing, there's Riga, which also they have 2 factories. It's a Chinese owner, and they do offset digital printing in a big way. And they also have, Riga has the hybrid screen printing as well. And then you got Transtech, which is a company out of Thailand. They have a digital sublimation printing factory in Thailand that produces for Nike, and then they set up a sister factory in Vietnam, and they do super high quality sublimation, digital sublimation printing. And then you have many Vietnamese companies like Tung Phac that do like all over print. And then you also have many screen printing factories that just do piece print. So yeah, it's whatever you need, Vietnam can do it. I would say 90%. There's still some things that China can do that Vietnam can't do, but Vietnam is catching up fast. Okay, and then sewing, like I always like to explain, there's 3 kinds of sewing factories. There's, for example, Taisun, it's family owned, and it's owned, the management is Vietnamese, and it's run the Vietnamese way. Then you've got Sun Ha, which is Vietnamese owned, but it's managed a Western way. Like, these guys are super certified. They even have like CT PAC certification, and they produce for major brands, and everything's certified, and they have all their ducks in a row. Then you've got Spectre, which is foreign owned and foreign managed. They have their own brand of sportswear, and they make for some very well-known sportswear brands. So those are like 3 groups of sewing factories. And then finally, of course, if you're going to do business in Vietnam, produce sportswear in Vietnam, you need to have logistics options, QC options, and legal options. So these are my go-to companies: LHD Law Firm, Knight Logistics, and Pro QC. So yeah, if you plan to come to Vietnam, I strongly recommend these 3 companies to help you out. Okay, so my name is Chris. I'm a Vietnam sourcing expert, and my main service is my clients. They pay me, and then I choose 3 to 5 factories for them to visit in a day, and I pick them up at their hotel and take them to visit the factories, and then at the end of the day, my service ends, and they choose who they work with, and I don't get paid commission. My website is vietnamfactorytours.com, and remember, where there's a will, there's a way. And welcome to Vietnam. Thank you.